Happy New Year. Welcome to the Season 2 finale of Quiet Connection, a podcast dedicated to ending the stigma around postpartum mental health. I'm Chelsea. This week, we're going international. I'm connecting with Lauren, Australia's first professional Instagrammer, a travel photographer, social media consultant, and mom of two. She shares her wildly contrasting birthing experiences and how they've shaped her view of herself as well as what's truly important in her life. Let's dive right in with Lauren.
Hello. Today we have a very special guest. We have our first international guest. Lauren, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Lauren is in Australia. So it is, for me, it is bedtime. For Lauren, it is time to start her day.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is crazy for me, but you're in my future. You're Thursday, I'm Wednesday. It's cuckoo.
Weird,
but,
yes.
Yeah. But I'm so excited to have you. And I could go sort of on and on about everything that I've learned about you over the past couple of weeks, but probably would be much better coming from your mouth. So could you tell me a little bit about yourself and who you were before you became a mom?
Well, telling you about myself now, that's the complicated part.
Yeah.
I think all mothers go through a huge identity shift. Very, very easy for me to tell you who I was before I had children. I was a professional photographer, full-time travel influencer, Australia's first professional Instagrammer. I was traveling the world, working for tourism boards, working for brands. I was an Olympus ambassador and earning a great living, talking on stages, running retreats and tours in Zimbabwe. I had an online photography course. I was an entrepreneur. And after I had children, my first daughter, that continued for a little while. But when I fell pregnant with my second child, my son, who's now 1, I decided that life was not for me anymore. I really wanted to focus on being a mum for a little while and figuring out who I was without those labels. I had a huge period of personal growth and personal transformation, which I think is common in pregnancy and in these childbearing, child-raising years. I'm not sure. I've talked to a lot of women who have had that experience. And one of my big breakthroughs was just how much of my sense of worth was tied to this title of entrepreneur or professional Instagrammer or photographer. I got a lot of validation and pride, and I didn't feel like I was anything without that. And in particular, I had bias towards being a mother or being a stay-at-home mother. I thought it was boring and mundane, and I didn't want to introduce myself to people as, I'm Lauren, I'm a mum. So there was a lot of shit to unpack, to be honest. There was quite a lot to unpack there. Gave away the business, gave away a really successful 7-figure business when I fell pregnant with my second. Really sat into an existential crisis for about a year. Coming out the other end of that now. Who am I now? I mean, I'm a writer. I'm a storyteller. I'm a human. I'm a mother.
Yeah.
I'm everything and nothing at all.
I mean, that's so much to sum up in such a short amount of time, but it's crazy true. You can sort of see that transformation through your work through social media too. Like even just knowing you through Instagram for such a short amount of time, I could see that shift in you and in your work and in your content, and it's been kind of beautiful I'm sort of witnessing it after the fact. I'm coming into it late, but I'm really excited to get into this because it's crazy. You really did do a total 180 shift in your entire lifestyle.
Absolutely. My life could not be more different now and better.
I was just going to say, and you can see it in what you post, that you are so much happier, it feels like.
Yes.
Yeah.
More content, more at peace, more grounded. Yeah. More feminine.
Yeah. I love it. I'm super envious. And I mean, I'm also envious just of where you're living because you have the opportunity to really be in nature and be in water and embrace all of that. But yeah, it's been a crazy ride for you. And again, I have I've read your blog, and I'm encouraging all of my listeners to read your blog, so I know some of this, but you didn't always picture yourself being a mom.
No, I never wanted to have children. I had a relatively troubled childhood. Parents separated when I was quite little. I drowned when I was very little as well, which was a very traumatic event that caused a lot of ripples to go through my family, and have long-running circumstances came from that. I had unrecognized or unacknowledged trauma. And I think, like a lot of people, or my experience was that I hid from all of that pain and grief by just being busy. You know, I got out of school, I ran into everything that I did. I ran into uni, ran into work, ran into, you know, I had this opportunity with Instagram 10 years ago. I quit my job to sort of pursue what being an influencer would be like, and I filled every minute of every day thinking and doing and acting, and, you know, a very masculine energy, that very yang, like I'm in action, I'm doing, I'm a doing person, a type A. But, you know, I didn't realize that I had, you know, a pretty bad anxiety. What's the word they say? It's you know, I guess socially acceptable anxiety, or high functioning anxiety.
Yeah.
I felt, you know, I got to the end of every year in business, and I was like, I'm just going to have a heart attack one day. Like, it's all too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just wild. I can't even remember what the original question was. You didn't picture
yourself having kids.
I'm getting back to that. So when I started to work on myself, which happened by accident, I attended an event. I was invited as a guest for free to a personal development event. And I actually appeared on this guy's podcast. And he was to my event, and I walked into that room. It was a 3-day, really intensive, you know, almost like a Tony Robbins style, like, yeah, excitement, action. And he was talking about ego. He was talking about quantum physics. He was talking about overwhelm. He was talking about all of these topics that I'd never even thought about. And I realized, like, holy shit, I'm not doing this right. Like, I am not doing my life right. So I came out of that event and decided to get a little bit more into personal development. I wanted to slow down. I started to say no to job opportunities. I started doing yoga, and I hired a business coach. I actually hired 2 business coaches. One was for marketing, one was for mindset. And with the mindset coach, I started working on my psyche and my limiting beliefs and my trauma and all kinds of stuff. And lots of stuff came up from that. And it was through that period of doing that event and hiring that coach and starting to look inwards that I was like, you know, I'm getting to the age where I won't have this decision in front of me anymore if I keep delaying. I was in my late 30s. And do I want to have children? I knew my husband did. He was not my husband at the time, my partner, long-term partner. I knew that time was running out if I wanted to make that decision. I knew that I wanted to leave a legacy, and I always thought that my legacy would be my work. But I started thinking, you know, your children are your legacy as well. That's your bloodline, and you raise these little humans. And I would not say that my biological clock was ticking. I would not say there was a strong evolutionary urge for me. It was more of a practical, pragmatic, you know, I'm doing all this work on myself. This is a huge part of the human experience. I want to, like, really lean into humanness, to being human.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of really weird, different reasons. But when I decided to get pregnant, and I fell pregnant quite quickly, I went to Antarctica. I had this job booked to Antarctica, and I wasn't allowed to be pregnant on it. So I said to my partner, you know, we're going to have to wait because I'm definitely going to Antarctica. So when I did that trip, I went off the pill. Stopped taking the contraceptive pill. And on, I think, my 3rd cycle after that, I fell pregnant in Zimbabwe, which is where my husband is from. We were in his family home. It was the day I finished my photography tour. My second photography, I did 2 back-to-back photography tours. And I didn't know, obviously, the day that I fell pregnant that I was pregnant. But 2 weeks later, when I found out, all of those pragmatic, logical, like human experience, la, 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 all of that gone in an instant. And I was like, I will protect this baby at all costs with my life. Don't fuck with me. Like, I can't even tell you, the second I found out I was pregnant, I was like, mum. Like, mum.
Yeah.
100%. Nothing in between.
Snapped right into
Biological
it.
clock is like, boom. And it's all I wanted. It's all I could think about, all that I wanted. It was a very, very strange and sudden shift, because I was one of those women, you know, I was high flying. I was frequent flyer, platinum, like 100 flights a year, rubbing shoulders with important people, like successful entrepreneur, high earning. And all of a sudden I'm pregnant, and all of these ideas that I had about motherhood, like, oh, you know, if I got pregnant and I had a miscarriage, I would understand that it wasn't viable. The second I was pregnant, I was like, I will not lose this baby. It will kill me. Like, this is my baby. This is my child. It's just so funny how quickly everything changed for me, and has continued to change. But that really sudden, the second I peed on the stick and the second little line popped up, everything, every single little ounce of biological urge that you can imagine hit me in that moment.
Yeah. That's so, and it's crazy how much of a switch it is, like how intense it is. And it doesn't happen for everybody, but when it does, it's crazy. It's like your whole body goes into mama bear mode, your mind, body, spirit, everything.
Yes, that was me.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And you have a really cool story to tell too. Like when that's with your daughter, right? Your daughter's the older. Yes. Yeah, you've got a super cool story to tell her when she's older. Like, guess where? Well, she may not want to know. Guess where you were conceived. But anyway, so how was pregnancy for you? How was the experience?
It's funny, I always used to joke, especially when I was thinking, you know, this might be something that I do. I always used to joke, I'll be one of those women that puts weight on everywhere, and I have, you know, the big feet and the puffy face. And
that was me.
That's what I thought would happen to me. But I was literally the picture of a glowing, beautiful, bountiful, pregnant goddess woman. It was great. I didn't put on any weight anywhere except the beautiful bump. My skin was beautiful. I looked amazing, not going to lie. And because I'm quite tall, I'm not just tall, but I have a really long torso. So I have the perfect proportions for carrying a child. So I had just this beautiful, beautiful tummy that I love showing off. And I didn't have any fluid retention. I didn't have anything like that. But I did have pretty bad morning sickness. Not to the point, you know, I wasn't throwing up, but I would say from about week 8 or 9 until about week 13 in both pregnancies, I just felt like death itself. I would just wake up with no energy and feel nauseous and feel like that all day until the end of the day. And that's really hard for me because I'm a relatively high energy person. And yeah, it's just nothing can kind of shake it. For me, nothing could shake it. I would just be like, I just need a better mindset, or I just need to rest, or I would try everything. And no, I felt like crap for about 5 weeks, both pregnancies.
Yeah. They have all of these like remedies and like home cures and stuff for none of it. It doesn't work. It's baloney.
For me, nothing worked. I just had to surrender.
Yeah.
Surrendering.
No, I bought into the little preggy pop things that they had, and I was just sucking on those, and they tasted good, but they didn't do anything.
Oh, bad feeling, isn't it? That nausea, it's like nothing else. It's not like being nauseous with anything else.
No, and especially if you're not throwing up and you're just nauseous the whole time, you're almost like, could I just throw up, please?
Yeah, no relief.
Yeah,
no relief.
Please. But other than that, your pregnancy was pretty smooth.
Yes.
And you have an incredible partner who you refer to as Dreamboat, which I love. I absolutely love that. No idea what his name is, but I know that he's amazing because he's Dreamboat. And he wanted to be a dad, so he was all in on this. I'm assuming Absolutely. He was super supportive through that whole period.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. He was great.
And then I don't even know how to seamlessly go into this because it's such a stark contrast. You had this beautiful pregnancy, but not everything is perfect. Not everybody's life is perfect. And your birth story is a pretty stark contrast to your pregnancy journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you kind of want to walk us through that a little bit? I feel like we're jumping right into it, but
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go into it. So I didn't know a lot about birth, although I had spent time in Zimbabwe. My husband is Zimbabwean, like I said. I'd had the tours over there, but previously to that, I'd spent a fair bit of time over there, and all of my Emmanuel's sisters and his brothers' wives, who are called Mororas in that culture. So if you're a daughter-in-law of the matriarch, I'm a Morora. So the other Mororas, there was a lot of children in the family. And in particular, when I was there for the Zimbabwe tours that I ran, the photography tours, 3 of the sister-in-laws had all had babies at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
They were, I think, three or 4 weeks apart between the 3 of them. So, and they were all 3 months old when I was there. So I had 3 3-month-old babies, and everybody was breastfeeding. All of the women were breastfeeding. They'd all had natural childbirths. It just looked so easy and seamless. Like, this is what we're born to do. You have your baby, you breastfeed it. There wasn't all of these bloody cribs and nappies, and nappies obviously, but all of the bits and pieces, the change tables, the nurseries, the 101 little things that we buy. They have nappies, they sleep with their parents, it's all co-sleeping, they feed at the breast, they have a couple of blankets wrapped around them, and that's about it. That's raising children. So I wanted to take a really natural approach like that. I did a hypnobirthing course to prepare for birth, and we did it privately because I was still quite busy leading up to having the baby. So the hypnobirthing coach would trudge up the 3 flights of stairs carrying her little, skeleton pelvis and her fake baby and her posters and, all the bits and pieces that they have. And come into my very hot bedroom. It was the middle of summer, I remember that. And, talk to us about different techniques and tools that we can use in childbirth and having a birth plan and having affirmations. And, I printed out, I designed and printed these beautiful affirmations with my images from all over the world. Like, you can do hard things and you can do anything for 60 seconds, like all these beautiful platitudes. And they were all stuck up on my wall along with my visualization and my birth plan and lots of visuals to help sort of anchor me during childbirth. And, I was very adamant I didn't want an induction because I knew about the cascade of interventions that can occur when you're induced. And so I was really holding out, even though the hospital, given my advanced maternal age, they wanted to induce me at 39 weeks.
What?
I had a healthy pregnancy. Yep, 39 weeks. When I got to 40 weeks, I didn't get to 40 weeks. I got to 39 plus 6. Lucky. Because with your first one, I think your intuition, well, for me, my intuition was there. I knew that things were okay. However, the fear language, fear-based language that the hospital was using with me, increased risk of stillbirth, I didn't know how I would get if I got to 41 weeks pregnant, if I got to 42 weeks, and the statistics were rising. I didn't know what my choice would be. However, I was lucky. I went into labour at 39 plus 6, so I didn't have to face that. However, I had turned down an induction at 39 previously. So I went into labour overnight, and I'd been reading Ina May's Guide to Natural Childbirth the night before, which is just such a lovely read. So I was reading birth stories, and I fell asleep, and I was getting some cramps overnight, and I woke up and I felt what I thought were early contractions, and I was so excited. And I did everything they told you not to do. They're like, when you're in early labour with your first pregnancy, like, rest, sleep if you can, don't do anything. I was like, I'm in labour! I had planned to make lentils that day. I was doing some postpartum food for the freezer, and so I made this full batch of lentils. I had to cut up like kilos and kilos of root vegetables. I had a couple of business calls. I had to wrap everything up, like I'm going to have a baby in a day or so, or whatever. So I was just like busy, bustling around. I was texting everybody and telling them all about it, and it was consistent. It kept building throughout the day. And by sort of 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the early evening, afternoon, it felt like, okay, I can't really talk through a contraction anymore. I sort of have to stop and focus. And I think that it's progressing. So let the doula know, let the birth photographer know. And I think it was around 8 o'clock at night, my husband and I, Dreamboat and I, headed to the hospital. I refused an internal of vaginal examination. My waters hadn't broken yet, but they started to break while I was in the hospital. My doula met me over there, and ultimately the hospital said, "You're not progressed enough, go home." So we got into the taxi. My waters broke in the back seat of the taxi.
Oh my God.
It was horrible. I was wearing this really this goddess skirt that was huge, and I just used it to mop up the amniotic. It was, but I had a really uncomfortable taxi ride.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, really uncomfortable. We got home and my doula decided to come back to my house with us, and I laboured at home for about 5 or 6 hours, and all kinds of stuff was gushing out of me. I'm like, what is happening? And I was so tired. I usually go to bed about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. So at this point, it's 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. I'm at home. I don't know what's happening. I'm scared. I've never done this before. It's getting really intense. I'm not at the hospital. Is this safe? Lots and lots of thoughts going through my mind, trying to surrender, trying to do my breathing. Got myself pretty under control, but I felt like I would feel safer at the hospital. So I started to get a bit emotional and a bit teary, I guess because of the fear. And my doula was like, "Look, I think you could be transitioning. If not, you're 3 in 10. You're definitely progressing. We're just going to get you in." So we went to the hospital again. If I thought the last car ride from the hospital was uncomfortable, this one I was squirming on the back seat, contorting every contraction, these weird contortions to try and get comfortable. And I don't remember the pain at all from that labour. I don't remember it at all. It's completely faded. But I got to the hospital, refused the vaginal examination, but on the word of my doula for how things had been going for the last many hours, it was now about 3 a.m, they decided to admit me and take me into a birth suite and run the water for the birthing pool. And I was just so relieved. I got into the birthing pool and I was like, oh, okay, I feel safe. I'm settled. I can have my baby. A couple of hours passed. I was still contracting at the same rate. Nothing had really intensified too much. At this point, I did say, "Yes, you can give me an examination, but don't tell me the number." And everybody was all smiles after that examination. I later found out that my midwife, and this is a hospital midwife, there's no continuity of care, she had measured me at 8 centimetres, which was interesting given what I'm about to tell you. So they let me get back in the pool. Do you feel like pushing? They start asking me, and then I start really getting into my head at this point, because I'm like, I've been here for a long time. I know they don't like you there for a long time. There's a timer on it. As soon as you've been in labour for a certain period of time in a public hospital in the state that I live in Queensland, they're wanting to start to intervene. They're wanting to start to speed things along. I don't know if that, it's definitely hospital policy, but also given the amount of pregnant women coming into the hospital and they need to free up the birth suites. And so I start freaking out a little bit about that. And I also start to worry. My birth photographer is now here. She's been here for a long time and she'd just had a baby. I was worried about her and her baby. My doula's been with me overnight. She's, drinking coffee like it's going out of style. So's Dreamboat. What's wrong with me? Why? Where's my baby? I don't feel like pushing. I'm scared. I don't know what's happening. And all of these thoughts are going through my mind. And I start to think maybe there's something mental that I need to let go of. Maybe I need to surrender. And I'm crying and I'm thinking of my mum and my old wounds. And it was just, my mind was a mess. It was all over the place. And at this point, I had a new midwife because the shift had changed over, and she asked to measure me, and she measured me at 3 centimetres.
What? I mean, that's not a small difference.
No, it's not a small difference. So I had, explicitly in my birth plan asked, don't talk to me when I'm in labour. And that was, of course, everybody talks to you. Mm-hmm. They didn't tell me the number the first time, and I respect that. But after I was measured at 3 centimetres, the midwife, and she, bless her, she was really advocating for me, but she had to say something because she's got people looking over her and what's happening in her room. And so she pulled us all aside. I got dragged out of the birthing pool, and I'm now sitting on the table and I'm being told you're only 3 centimetres. This could go on for another day or more. What do you want to do? your options are to go home, but we don't recommend that because we've had our fingers inside your vagina and you could get an infection. So, boom, straight up, the first intervention that I agree to, and it's already, I can't go home. I could kill my baby. We could give you morphine. We could give you the epidural. What do you want to do? So at this point, I have been awake. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. I've been awake for 24 hours longer because I had a pretty restless night the night before. I'm absolutely exhausted. I've been 3 and 10 for 18 hours by this point.
Yeah.
So I said I would like to have the epidural and go to sleep. They didn't say anything about the syntocinon, which is obviously the drip that they put in to help aid your contractions. They just kind of do that. Get an epidural, they just kind of do that. They don't even really tell you about the risks or... So, yeah, your body actually stops producing oxytocin as soon as the syntocinon goes in, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
So they did all of that. And, when I look back at it all, that is one decision I can't regret because I made that decision because I knew I had nothing in the tank. And I was an idiot. I hadn't been eating enough. I was still practicing intermittent fasting. I'd made some real mistakes and not listened to my body and not given my body what it needed. So the decision to take the epidural was on me, and I was really grateful for it. Really, really grateful for it. They put it in. The pain went away instantly. I lay down on the bed and I fell asleep. And there's a couple of pictures of me from my birth photographer, and I look disassociated. But I also look a bit relieved.
Yeah.
And I look exhausted. I look really exhausted. So I fell asleep, and then I was woken up and I was told it's time to push.
Oh my God.
Several hours later, 6 hours later or something like that. They're tracking your contractions on the monitor while you're asleep, while you're passed out. They gave me another VE, vaginal examination. And I had the midwife in there, and the obstetrician was in there now. And she's like, she wanted to use forceps. And I've just woken up from asleep.
Yeah.
Can't feel anything, don't know what's going on really. Like nothing's really explained to me, but there's an obstetrician in there and she wants to use forceps. She doesn't want to give me a chance to push. And she's worried that the baby's in distress. And at this point, my mama bear instinct kicked in, and I am like, no. Like, everything else you're telling me, I don't know what the fuck's going on. Like, I'm in labor here. This is a lot for me. However, my baby is not in distress. And I really, really put my foot down on that one. So they wanted to do a test where they basically stick a needle into your vagina and prick the top of your baby's head to measure the cortisol levels, to, measure if there is any distress. And in the end, I said yes to that because I was like, I will prove it to you. I will prove that my baby is totally fine. So they did that test. Baby was totally fine.
Of course, yeah.
Of course. So they agreed to let me push. Of course, you can't feel anything with an epidural, but I was doing my best, and my midwife was amazing. She was right up there, like, you're doing it. You've got the right spot. She's got her fingers down there. Yep, this is going to work. And the obstetrician is like, you can try for a few more minutes. And I think, my memory recollects that I was given maybe 3 or 4 contractions to push. And then she was like, okay, we really have to get this baby out now. And her language, her tone, her demeanor, everything about her was urgency. And I got into fight or flight. Yeah. So I'm like, I felt really unsafe. And I didn't know whether to believe, my instinct that was so strong not that long ago when I was saying my baby is fine. It's now been overridden by this sense of urgency that's coming from this obstetrician. And I was like, what should I do? And she's like, look, if it were me, I would want my baby out right now. And it's like, it's now seeming like an emergency, right, the way that she's talking to me. And I'm like, oh God, like I've come this far. I don't want anything to happen to my baby. And like I said, the intuition's gone, but I did say I'd like to try the vacuum before the forceps because I had been told in my hypnobirthing that that's less invasive for the child. So she tries the vacuum 3 times, which again is hospital policy. But, baby hadn't even started moving down the birth canal. I'd done 3 little pushes.
Yeah.
So no way. No, the vacuum's not going to work. Next minute, forceps. And I said, I don't want an episiotomy. And she said, you have to. So just one after the other.
Yeah.
One after the other. So they pulled her out, and that was hard, obviously. they gave me the fucking syntocinon shot in my leg to get the placenta out. Didn't agree to that either. And, you know, you forget about it. They put your baby on your chest and she's alive. And, you know, I found out her sex. I didn't know her sex until she was on me. And that was such a beautiful moment because I thought her umbilical cord was a penis. And I thought it was a boy the whole time. And I was like, it's a boy. And then, you know, their little vaginas get so swollen. I thought it was her balls. And I checked twice. And both times I saw male genitals. And then it's like, no, actually. So that was really beautiful. And, you know, meanwhile, the obstetrician and her assistant, they've started cleaning me up and pulling out the placenta. And, like, I'm not an active participant in my birth at all. They're just doing it's happening to me. It's happening to me. So, you know, baby's on my chest. I don't even care. Whatever. I've forgotten about that for now. And she's beautiful and she's bleeding. You know, she's got blood and marks on her head from the vacuum. And she's got these big marks on her little face. And, you know, she was perfect, but imperfect. You know, she was marked already. She was marked while she was still in there with that little needle that they stuck on her. And it looked really painful. It looked so painful. You know, they cleaned her up. They checked her. She was a APGAR score. She was 9, totally fine, healthy, strong. Came out kicking and screaming baby. No need whatsoever for everything that happened after I took the epidural. Like I said, the epidural, I'll take that one. That was my choice. Syntocinon, forceps, vacuum, episiotomy, which FYI, horrible. Like that thing, that scar took me weeks and weeks and weeks to recover from the pain of that scar. And I ended up, you know, they put a catheter in and I'm not sure if it was the catheter or the episiotomy or the trauma, but I ended up with an overactive bladder after I gave birth, which for some people is for life. Yeah. I was lucky. Like I actually overcame that, but with bladder retraining, but for some people that's for life. And I just, yeah, like I said, I didn't really think about it too much there, but in the days, even the hours and days afterwards, I just felt like something was not right with what happened to me. Something was not right. We stayed overnight in hospital. We were sent home the next day, but I was having trouble latching because Markia had a fair bit of jaundice under the treatment line, but, you know, she also had a lot of bruising, which contributes to jaundice. And so we were sent home, but we weren't able to latch much while we were at home. And she was just sleeping and sleeping and sleeping. And I'm like, oh, we've got a sleeping baby. No, like she's exhausted. Yeah. She can't wake up. So the next day we did have a midwife come and visit, which is something that you get in the public system here in Australia. She had a look at baby and suggested that we go to the special care nursery back at the hospital just to have her jaundice checked properly. And they also took her blood sugar levels at the hospital. And the jaundice was still under the treatment line, but she had low blood sugar because she hadn't had enough milk. And the jaundice was, you know, she needed the milk to move all of that through her system. So then I had to go to the hospital for another night, which was really traumatic. My milk was coming in, so I was so emotional. And I'm back in hospital. I'm feeling like a complete failure. Not only have I failed to birth my child, but now I've failed to feed my child. I was really, really lucky that I did get good support. I had a couple of good midwives. They taught me how to express, how to latch as well. So I'd always try latching Markia and then would top her up with the bottle. And she was doing both really well. She had a lot of milk that night. We went home again the next day and she started latching almost straight away. But there was just this sense of, again, like something has happened to me. And, you know, I was telling my birth story to some people close to me and they all knew that I wanted a natural birth. And it was also a huge hit to the ego, like, which is something they don't really talk about. But, like, yeah, I felt really ashamed of myself as well. Like, I'd told everybody I was going for a natural birth and they're like, oh, so what happened? And I'm like, oh, you know, epidural, episiotomy, forceps, like all of this stuff, syntocinon. Like, I can't even produce enough love hormone to birth my own child. So lots and lots of shame. And the predominant response from people, but one person in particular was like, giving birth is really hard and you should just be lucky that you're safe and that baby's safe, and, that old line, right? Like,
Ugh.
totally diminishing my pain and my trauma.
Yes.
And I was just like, oh, okay, I suppose, like, I've just got to put that out of my mind. And, like I said, I kind of jumped back into work really quickly after I had Markia. I had a little bit of the baby bubble, which was beautiful. I just think straight after you've had your baby, like, the presence that you feel and that connection to your child and that love for me was intoxicating. And I was just like, I want to have 100 babies. Like, give me every baby in the world if I can feel like this. Mental health wise, as far as postpartum depression, I didn't have any, but I felt the whispers of it, if that makes sense. Like, for me, it felt like it could pull me down at any moment if I didn't keep doing the things that made me feel good. So one of those things was sunset every day. Take the baby, Dreamboat and I would walk to the water and would watch the sunset and have the fresh air and, a little breastfeed, outdoor breastfeed. So that was all okay. But then I basically jumped straight back into work. And I didn't have a chance to think about what had happened too much, apart from if I was telling my story. I wrote my daughter's birth story just before her first birthday, actually. And, it talks about the interventions almost in a positive light. It was a shame that this happened, but, you were safe and you were here. And so, yeah, for a good couple of years, it was just like, that sucked, but, safe baby, safe mom. And then I got pregnant again. And I was like fucking angry.
Yeah. I mean, how could you not be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I created a lot of headspace for myself. Like I said, I gave up my business when I fell pregnant again. I had an existential crisis. I had a lot of time on my hands to ruminate on everything. And it was the first time I'd actually thought to myself, what happened to me was not okay.
Yeah.
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 What happened to me was not okay.
And so many things that you have said to speak to anyone who has gone through birth trauma or trauma in general, that sort of discrediting yourself and being like, well, I completely agree with you. I hate that line, like, healthy mom, healthy baby, everything's fine. It's kind of right up there with silver linings for me. I don't like the term silver linings because I feel like it completely diminishes whatever it is you've gone through. But yeah, you were completely removed from your birth experience.
Completely. They did birth to me.
Yeah. And it's amazing to me that you were able to bond with her in the way that you were. And like you said, like, you could feel the whispers of maybe like baby blues or depression, but that I get this impression from you anyway, that you're an amazing self-advocate. So like it seems like you knew what you needed to do for yourself to make sure that you were going to be okay. But what was that day like when you finally acknowledged, like, that was not okay?
I would say I had acknowledged it internally because I had a lot of anger that I wanted to release before going into birthing my son. And I wrote it down. I wrote out who I was angry at. I took all those words and I burnt them at the beach. I had a little ceremony. I was quite far pregnant at this point. And it felt, therapeutic, but also a little bit trite. Like, oh, here's something that I have to tick off my to-do list. So I allowed myself to feel the anger, but not at the depths that I felt like I needed to. So it wasn't until after I had the birth experience of my son, which was a completely different experience.
Yeah.
And I realized, I can't remember where I first saw it, but I realized that Birth Trauma Awareness Week was coming up. And I made the decision to share my story. And when I started to share and write my story and dredge up the memories of it, that was the moment. That was the moment. And after I shared it, because I think I shared it first to my email database, which everything that I send to my email database does end up on my blog. So, because my blog doesn't get a lot of traffic, but my email database does, so it goes there first. So I sent it out, And I had quite a few people respond. And then I had like this fire inside of me after doing that. It felt like the dam had been opened. And I also shared on Instagram at that time. And I shared a post. I shared a really long multi-slide Instagram story. And I started getting into conversations with other women. And I ended up at some Birth Trauma Awareness Week event about an hour's drive from me. And just that whole period of a couple of weeks, it was just like fire inside of me, absolute fire inside of me. And I had so many conversations with women that were just absolutely devastating in so many different ways, like anything from a woman in her 60s who carries birth trauma from 30 or 40 years ago to people who wished they had interventions because they lost their child, to people who had too many interventions and lost their child, and everything in between. But what I realized is that every single woman I was talking to had been let down by the system in some way.
That was something that I was really interested in initially when I reached out to you, because I think we have an idea over here in the States that it's better elsewhere and that healthcare in general is better elsewhere and that we're the ones that are doing it all wrong. So that was something that was really surprising to me. And I'm learning even more hearing you recount it now, that some of the things that you said, like that wouldn't happen, at least it wouldn't happen here. I'll say I'm a little here. When I say here, I mean Vermont. And I also shouldn't say it wouldn't happen because it probably has, but I haven't heard of it happening. Like you saying, like, yeah, they want to move you through the system because there's only so many beds. Like, I want to hear, listeners, let me know. But like, I've never heard of something like that. Like, I feel like once you're admitted, you're kind of there for the duration, and I don't know, like that feels so intrusive and so dehumanizing for an experience as personal and deeply emotional as birthing another human. Like, to just be like, all right, well, you've been here long enough, it's time to get your baby out. That just blows my mind. I know I had asked you in some of our very early conversations, like, did you have midwives coming to visit you all the time? Because that's what we hear. We hear that you guys have midwives coming to see you like every day for weeks after the birth, and that and you have, I've even heard, I've heard it about other countries too, but you guys have birthing boxes where you get sent home with all of these goodies, and and then we're like, why don't we have that? But then to hear your experience, and then to hear you say that you are meeting all of these other people who are going through exactly the same thing. It's not just us.
No.
What a stark, I feel like I've said this phrase already, but what a stark contrast to the experience you had when you were with your sister-in-laws and witnessing them having their babies and just existing and just loving on them.
In Zimbabwe, interestingly, after you have your baby, you move back in with your parents for about, I can't remember what Emmanuel told. It's either a month or 3 months.
I wonder if it's, so one of the series that I'm doing for our support group is the way that other cultures take care of mothers.
Yeah.
And the thing that I keep finding in so many other cultures is a minimum of 40 days. You're with your family. Yes. And you don't do anything.
No. And you get taught everything.
Yeah.
How to breastfeed, how to change nappies, how to bath baby. It all gets passed down by female relatives in your family, in your direct family line.
Yeah. And that's not a thing.
No.
It's not a thing.
No.
Yeah, I think there's such a view of, well, we're a Western culture, and we have all of these great medical advances, and so it must be safe. And I am not a doctor, and I don't want to discredit anyone, and I don't want to say don't listen to your doctors, because that's obviously not my lane either. But the mortality rate for birthing people and infants in this country, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but it's staggering in the US. It's compounded by the mental health aspect. So not only are people experiencing infant loss or traumatic birth that leads to loss of the mother, but postpartum suicide is one of the leading causes of death in birthing people in the US.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. So I guess I want to sort of like make it clear to listeners that it's not unique to us in the US, and it's something that needs to be talked about.
Absolutely.
And it's and to not be ashamed to talk about it. When you were mentioning that shame about like, well, why can't I birth my baby? Like, this is what I'm made to do. That's a deep shame. That goes deep, and it speaks to I identify as non-binary, but I'm female presenting, and I was raised female. And you're right, there is this instinctual piece of you, even if you weren't planning on becoming a mother, that's like, well, this is what I was created to do. That's not all we were created to do. And the shame and the guilt associated with your birth not going the way that you wanted it to, it's unnecessary and it's unfortunate. Because you're a badass. Like, you are a badass.
Well, I remember that now. I do remember that now. Now that I've had the empowering birth experience, but so many people have the disempowering birth experience once or more times, and then they stop having children and they never ever get to realize what they're capable of and what their power is. Yeah. And just circling back when you talked about the idea that in Australia it's better, I did want to loop back to that because we do have good resources here. However, when you've just had a baby, when I first had Markia, the level of overwhelm that I felt was higher than ever before in my life because every single thing that I was doing was brand new and I had to figure it out. And overwhelm, it's just like, it's too much information overload or stimulation overload, and you're in it. So when you're in it, the hospital gives you a little red book and it's got all the numbers to call and the drop-in centres and this you can get and that you can get. You can't even read. Like,
right.
You can put words on a page, but they don't sink into the old brainy, do they? Because it's just, you've got this tiny little human to keep alive. And then you've got all the love bubble, and then for some, and then you've got the potential postpartum depression, and then you've got the lack of sleep. Like, do not underestimate the toll that has on you, I can tell you. And so even though there's good resources, there's terrible communication of that. And we do have the home midwife visits. I think it's either 2 or 3, unless you have continuity of care, and then you can potentially get a little bit more. But that's it. 2, I think it was 2 with Markia. 2 midwives dropped in, took a couple of measurements, weighed her, and then left. And that actually contributed to a bit of my overwhelm because they both gave me different advice. And are you swaddling? You don't have to swaddle. You should definitely swaddle. This is how you swaddle. Different technique, like different midwives, different advice, it was just a lot.
Yeah, there's no continuity there.
No.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's good to recognize that even if there are resources, if they're not being communicated well, or there's no continuity of care, then what good are they?
Yeah, exactly.
I did have a question too about, you talk a lot about your doula. Is that common? Is that something that's common in birthing practices? Because in the US, it's not covered under insurance.
No.
And B, most people don't even know what a doula is, or they confuse a doula and a midwife, and they're very different things.
Very different.
Yeah. So is that something that's a little more common in Australia?
I mean, I'm a little bit, I'm not quite mainstream.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a hippie. So I sort of run in circles where it's common, I guess you would say. Like a lot of the content I consume and the people I spend time with, and there's the stuff that draws my attention, the stuff I'm interested in is a little bit alternate. So it's a little fringe. I feel like it's becoming more mainstream now, but I couldn't really tell you because it's everywhere that I see. But like I said, a lot of what I consume and who I'm around in my circles, it's mainstream for that, but not necessarily for others. A doula is, a birth servant. It's a pretty old practice. They can't deliver a child. They can't do anything if there's anything wrong during delivery. They're more there to support the woman and advocate for her. And I did a lot of healing when I was pregnant with Markia. And with both babies, I did a lot of healing, a lot of personal development, a lot of self-work. But with Markia, I realized for the first time in my life that I was carrying a lot of hatred and bias towards men, towards masculine. My parents separated when I was quite young. It was not very amicable. I heard a lot of bad stuff about men throughout my entire life from my mother, well-wishing, of course, but, that stuff sinks in when you're a little child.
Yeah.
And I had to work on that because I was about to have a baby with a man
Yeah.
and rely on a man to take care of me and our child. So while I recognized that I had that inside of me and I needed to work on it, I also felt very strongly that I wanted women in my corner. And so I knew I wasn't having continuity of care at the hospital because I wasn't eligible for that option with Markia because of I was still traveling a lot. So I couldn't commit to, it's a very rigid set of appointments when you have continuity of care. But I did want at least one person there who was female, who had feminine energy, who could hold space for me, that would be that would have that continuity with me. So that's why I opted to have a doula, and it's not covered by insurance or anything like that. I had to pay for that out of pocket. I did it pretty last minute, so I didn't have, in the end, a lot of continuity of care. I think I'd only met her once before she was looking at my vagina and my undies.
And then you were besties.
Yes, forever. But I was really glad that I had her. It was good to have somebody there who was really familiar with birth. I did, when I had the experience that I had, I did feel like I wanted more from her and Emmanuel, my husband, Dreamboat. His name is Emmanuel. I felt like I was the one that was having to stick up for myself when push really came to shove. Like when the obstetrician was right in my face with all that fear-based language, neither of them sort of stepped between the two of us and said, like, time out. Yeah. If there's no risk to the baby now, like, please leave the room. We want to have this conversation. My husband, no experience with birth, never done it before. He would have felt way too intimidated to do that. Steph, having been around a lot of births and having seen the same situation roll out a lot, in the hospital system, I guess I kind of expected that. And I didn't realize that I did until way, way, way after, when I really started to reconcile it all. But I realized that I did feel like I had been let down by her a little bit when I really needed somebody to say, stop everything, let us have a look at this. Because I do know now that the hospital policy in that hospital is women on their first child are supposed to be given, it's either 1 or 2 hours to push for a first-time baby. And I was not given that. So she was even going over her own policy for no reason. Yeah. There was no evidence-based reason for her to be pushing to have that forceps delivery. Other than time, that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, I'm so curious, like, what was so pressing that she needed to get your baby out right
Nothing.
then? Right. Like, it blows my mind. I think, so one of the things that I've learned through speaking with some other birthing people who have gone through a similar birth trauma, at least in the US, after your water breaks, they're pretty adamant about getting baby out as quickly as possible. Because of risk of infection. And they do that fear-mongering thing too. They're like,
they put their fingers up there and give you the infection.
Yes. So, but again, I didn't have that experience, but I have heard it several times now that the doctors were saying, like, well, your water's broken, like, we're on the clock now. Like, baby needs to come now.
It's just not evidence-based.
It's not. It's not. And again, I've done, and research is always biased, but I have done research into it, and it's not evidence-based. So it's interesting to me that your water broke on the way home the first time, but that wasn't the reason that they wanted to get her out. Like, so I'm just so like, what the heck was this woman's issue? And I guess it also strikes me, it's like, you're a woman yourself. Like, maybe you don't have children. Maybe this woman has never had children, but like, you've birthed how many babies? This is your job. You're a woman. Like, can you can you not relate on a certain level? Like, let me trust my body and like stop scaring me through this process. Yeah, it just, I hate to say, because it sounds so insincere, but like I hate to say I'm sorry that you experienced that. I am sorry that you experienced that, and I'm sorry that your daughter experienced that. But there's nothing, there's no good thing to say about it.
No, there's repercussions. You know, the way that we're birthed into the world. There's a reason why babies are designed to move through your pelvis and to have that hardship on their way into the world. Like, this is a beautiful dance.
Yeah.
And I respect the hell out of modern medicine. And if it were a choice between my baby living or dying, whether I took an intervention or even a cesarean, like, of course, I want my child to live. But if my child can, as naturally as possible, navigate that journey to be birthed into the world the way that they're physiologically designed to do so, that's what I want.
Yeah.
That's what all women deserve, and babies.
Yeah.
And, you know, I when I went to that birth trauma event that I mentioned earlier, we had obstetricians talking, we had midwives talking, we had researchers and scientists talking, and they're actually now doing research to figure out how to fill the hormonal gap for the babies, because they're not getting the hormones that they need because of all the birth trauma that they're experiencing as babies.
Wow.
Like, they're coming into the world and they're not getting what they need. You know,
Yeah.
cesarean babies, and there's so many implications as well. Like, again, like, as much as I respect modern medicine, I also respect a woman's right to choose.
Yes.
However, you can't choose unless you have all of the information at hand. And a cesarean birth, like the rise of elective cesareans, I was born via elective cesarean. That's how I came into the world. And traumatic as hell. Like, I've gone back and done work around my birth,
Yeah.
which again is a bit hippie, a bit alternate. But you know, back when I was born, they took the child away from the mother. Mum was passed out, which thankfully they don't do that now. But I've talked to so many women who have felt, you know, adverse effects from the epidural or from the whatever they've been given, anesthetic, and they get given the baby and they feel nauseous or they can't hold it or they're in shock. And then they've got all this shame that they couldn't love and hold and give their child what they need, let alone what the child is experiencing.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many layers and so many nuances to it, and it's all just lots of badness.
It is, and it's so my oldest, who is 8 now, was born vaginally, but my youngest, who is 16 months, was a cesarean, and it was because she was breech. And there was only one doctor in the whole hospital that would deliver vaginally breech baby, and I just didn't. Yeah, so I didn't feel comfortable because I was like, well, what if that doctor's not there or whatever. But there's a really big part of me that wonders if the cesarean contributed to my mental health disorders. So I had severe postpartum mental health disorders, and I'm still working through that. And I can't attach it or attribute it to anything in particular. I mean, the mind and the body do what they do. But I have wondered many times over the last 16 months if it had something to do with my cesarean, and I did have an adverse reaction to the spinal that made me very, very sick. And then I hemorrhaged at home just a couple of days later. So yeah, like first of all, I don't know what the repercussions are going to be for my daughter, like what that experience was. And I didn't get that chest time. She wasn't breathing at the time, so she was whisked off to the NICU only for a couple of hours. But then I was so sick I had what they called a spinal headache, and I was so sick, I like couldn't take care of her. And so I wonder if my mental health issues stemmed from the surgical intervention. I'm never going to know, but when you talk about it that way, it's definitely something that's crossed my mind because it is. I've thought to myself many times, like, should I just have tried to have a breech birth? Should I just have tried to let it happen? I'm never going to know. But yeah, it's
I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. That's the thing about this whole experience, though, and the birthing experience, is that no two births are the same. And you know that because your two
Yes.
births were completely different.
Completely different.
Yes. And that's also something that I like to stress to my guests, especially the guests that are brand new moms and are really, really in the thick of some like PTSD or postpartum mental health disorders, is that it doesn't mean that if you have another baby, this is going to happen again. And it doesn't
No.
mean that you're going to feel this way forever. And it doesn't mean every single birth is so different. But that's why it's important for us to tell our stories.
Absolutely.
Especially, like you were saying, you didn't know what birth looked like. You didn't know what to expect. And I think we're fed this narrative that it's this beautiful, it should be, it's this beautiful process.
Can be.
Yeah, and it can be. What we see is that it's beautiful and it's natural and it happens and you bond with your baby instantly and life is beautiful. And that's just, it's not always how it is, and it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. And I guess that leads me to like your second birth experience, the birth of your son. Did you find that healing, or was it a completely separate, do you sort of compartmentalize it as a separate event?
No, it's all a part of my journey and my story. And I had a lot of work to do to deal with what had happened to me with Markia. And like I said, I hadn't completely dealt with it all.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that came when I decided to share my story publicly. However, with William, I did have continuity of care. So I had and that was publicly funded, so that was through the public hospital system. I was only lucky enough to get onto that program because my good friend knew one of the midwives in that program, and she basically was like, hey, have a look at the applications on your desk. If you can find Lauren, will you take her on your caseload? I probably wouldn't have gotten a spot otherwise because they only take low-risk pregnancies, and it's, the benchmark for a low-risk pregnancy is very strict. So even on my age alone, I'm kind of towing the line as to whether I can be considered low risk or not. So I got in, lucky. Not. I think it's like 20% maybe of birthing women on the Gold Coast will get into that program.
Wow.
They don't have any more capacity than that. So what you get for that is you see the same midwife the whole way through. So anytime that you would otherwise see a doctor or a hospital midwife, you see your midwife. You have to go to them, either to their home or the hospital, wherever they work in. And then that midwife is hopefully going to be the midwife that delivers your baby, but not necessarily, because they are, they have their rostered days off and their holidays and their annual leave. And there's actually a pretty good chance that another one of the midwives will deliver your baby because of the way that, there's only four, I think there's four of them in, it's called the Midwifery Group Practice, MGP. So, I knew that I was hopefully going to have Pip deliver my child, and I trusted Pip, but I also knew that, anything could happen. You don't know when you're going to have the baby. So that was cool. After you have the baby, you get home visits as well, as many as you need, really. So I knew that was coming. I decided not to do a home birth because I was in a lot of money scarcity. So mentally, because I'd given up my business, I did have savings. I could have afforded it. I did have the money. It's about $5,000 out of pocket to have a home birth in Australia. And I was like, I just can't, justify that money. And I wanted a birth photographer.
Yeah.
I basically spent the same amount of money on my birth photographer, which, I'm a photographer. I'm so happy I did that. But if it was like a gun to my head, you have to choose home birth or birth photographer. Knowing what I know now, with the benefit of hindsight, you would have to take the home birth.
Yeah.
Like, you would have to. Anyway, I took the photographer. I didn't take the home birth. I had, again, a pretty similar pregnancy to the last time. Healthy, beautiful, glowing, bountiful bump goddess woman. I had, the same amount of nausea and morning sickness in the first trimester. I had a lot of personal growth again, a lot of personal development, a lot of stuff going on for me. Got to the end of my pregnancy and I I got really sick, maybe 3 weeks out from giving birth, 3 or 4 weeks out. I actually got sick at my bump shoot. I'd planned a maternity shoot, and it was very early in the morning, sort of sunrise. It was very cold, and I'm parading around in my bra and undies on the beach, anything for the photo, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, like my immune system must have been low, something must have been building, but I got really sick after that shoot, and I ended up like on every asthma medication, every steroid, like I was so sick. So I went the Western medicine route, went to the doctor, got all the drugs that I needed, still wasn't lifting, and I just didn't know what to do. So in the end, I did an acupuncture session as well, which probably helped. I started like really taking my supplements and doing all the stuff that you're meant to do, but you don't really consistently do. Started doing all of that, anything to get better, right?
Yeah.
But then I ended up having I reached out to somebody that I had met at a business event that I had attended. I'd done a 10-day business event, and I'd met this really out there woman called Jenny, who is an energy healer, which is kind of like kinesiology, where they like muscle test you and they're like, you've stored some energy here, and they link it to your emotions. But Jenny's work is even more alternate and woo-woo, and like, I don't know how this works. Anyway, I reached out to Jenny and I'm like, I'm not doing so well. So she suggested that we have a session together, and we did have that session one afternoon. I was still very sick. I'd already talked to Pip, my midwife, that day, and I had a big cry, and so I got on the phone to Jenny, and she started clearing all of this emotional stuff and all of these stories and all of this, the trauma, and I can't even remember a lot of it, but she was doing the clearings. And she started communicating with Baby. And Baby was confused about this. Baby was confused about that. She was clearing for Baby as well. So, because Baby was contributing to me being sick. Baby was taking up a lot of space inside of me, because Baby was like not happy. Like, listen to me, Mum. Like, you're not listening to me. So just sitting on a nerve. I was getting headaches. I felt so full. Like towards the end of that pregnancy, I couldn't breathe. I felt like every inch of my insides was taken up, because Baby was just in there like, Mom, like, listen. I was so in my head again. Really, really bizarre session, hey? Like, I didn't even know if I believed in any of that, but a lot of what was coming up sat really solidly with me, like, yep, this feels true. This feels true. This feels true. After the session, I went from being completely overwhelmed, fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system, to being completely relaxed, parasympathetic nervous system. Everything had settled down. The headache was gone. Baby had taken up less space. I could breathe again. I fell asleep. I had like a 20-minute nap, and when I woke up, I wasn't sick anymore.
Oh my God.
2 weeks before I was due to give birth, I had this call. Wow. So I had my baby shower the next day, which I didn't know if I'd have to cancel because I'd been so unwell. Yeah. And I was 100%. It's 100%.
That is amazing.
And it was so crazy. It was so crazy. But from that moment onwards, I did everything that I could to listen to and honor my needs, to nourish myself, to care for myself, to love myself, to give Baby what it needed. If it was asleep, if it was a particular type of food or drink, I was just in touch with myself. And, you talked before about how for some women, you don't bond with your baby instantly, and that's all fine, and that's, it's all within the range of normal, it's all good. And when you were saying that, I was like, I agree with that, like 100%. However, you have to ask yourself, if our society was set up so that women had the time and space to honor themselves and nourish themselves and nurture themselves, and to ask for what they needed and be surrounded by support in pregnancy and beyond, would it be normal to not bond with your baby?
Right.
Would that be within the range of normal? I can't answer that question, but I do know that every part of our society, especially in first world Western countries, is not set up. Like, most of us women are working right up until we give birth. We don't have time to stop and have a nap. No. We don't have time to listen to our intuition and and go and get some specific meal or have somebody cook something for us. Most of us don't even want to ask people to help us. Like, that was a big thing for me. I felt shame, like I have needs. Oh, shameful, yucky, disgusting. Like, I wouldn't even want to ask my husband to go and fetch me something because it made me feel ashamed. Like, I should, I need to be a strong woman. I need to have this. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff, but a lot of stuff was resolved. And like I said, I spent the next 2 weeks really, really taking care of myself beautifully. And I took all these pictures on my iPhone during that time. At my baby shower, I had henna painted on my bump, and there's all these pictures of this hennaed bump and me with an orange juice or a cup of warm broth sitting out on the balcony, breathing the fresh air. Like, I was just in bliss. And I was like, I could have chosen this for most of my pregnancy, and here I am. I hit my due date and I was like, baby's not ready.
Yeah.
And I was like, because I felt when I was sick, the weakest I've ever felt in my life. And during that time, I decided to get my braces off. And I drove to drop my daughter off at daycare, and I called my husband in tears, and I'm like, I don't even know if I can drive to the orthodontist. Like, I was so weak, and I couldn't do anything for myself. But I did. I went and got my freaking braces off, as sick as I was. And then I just cried and cried and cried. I'm like, why am I punishing myself? Yeah. Anyway, I went past my due date and I was like, baby's letting me recover. Yeah. Baby wants me to be at my full strength and full capacity. And on that day, and not a day earlier, I will give birth. Hospital's calling, induction, this, induction that. I'm like, talk to me at 42 weeks. Leave me alone.
Like, not this time.
Nope. And I shut it down. Like, there was not even an element of doubt in my mind. And that actually started a lot earlier in the pregnancy because they wanted to give me some medications early on. They wanted to give me thyroxine for low functioning thyroid. And I was within the range of normal. And they wanted to give me aspirin because of my age, not because there was anything biologically wrong with my body. And I was just like, nope, no. I did not do the glucose tolerance test. I was like, nope, can't have diabetes if you don't test for diabetes. Like, I was like, nope to everything. Don't recommend that, by the way. Seek your own advice. Like, do what feels right to you. But anyway, I'd gotten to this point in the pregnancy and I was like fierce. I was like, nah, talk to me at 42 weeks. 41 plus 6. No. Sorry, 40 plus 6. So I'm almost 41 weeks. I wake up and I've got a burst of energy and I'm hungry. So I get in the kitchen and I'm like, let's have a picnic today. And I'm like cooking up potato salad and packing all these lunch boxes, cooking up a feast. And we go out, we get some beautiful fresh air. I'm like carb loading.
Yeah.
Potatoes, bread, salad, like give it all to me. We get home and I feel like pasta. And I'm like, I'm not even cooking for my daughter or my husband. I'm like, I'm cooking myself a bowl of pasta right now. And I made the biggest bowl of pasta and I ate the whole thing top to bottom. And then I was like, I think I'm going to go to bed. It's like, I don't know. It's like 7 o'clock. And I said to Emmanuel, I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen like soon. I went to bed, but I wasn't sleeping. I think I was reading and I kept getting up to go to the toilet for number 2s. And I've later realized again, like that can be a sign of early labor. Your body's just clearing itself out. Everything was just unfolding the way it's meant to. I was so relaxed. Everything my body needed. I was like, yep, you want some carbs? Here you go. You want some carbs? Here you go. You want to sleep? Here you go. You want to rest? So yeah, I was in a good place. And I went into labor that night. Similar to the last time, I was sort of in labor and sleeping through it, bits and pieces. But I woke up at 5 and it was quite, too intense to sleep. My husband had to get my daughter ready for daycare. And, my biggest fear in this second birth was to be unsupported because I felt unsupported in my first birth. So then my husband leaves the apartment with my daughter and I am alone, unsupported in my apartment. And at this point, things really kick in.
Of course.
They really kick in. So I'm in my head now. Again, I'm not going to be able to do this. Like, I'm going to need an epidural. Like, I can't handle the pain. I'm going to have to go to the hospital. Like, I feel so ashamed. What am I going to tell people? And I'm just in it. I'm like victim mentality. The mind is buzzing. Blah, blah, blah. And I get this 1 minute of lucidity in the middle of, in the pause between contractions. And in that moment, I sent 2 messages. One was to my midwife and one was to Jenny. Jenny, the woman who had done that energy healing session with me. And, I say to Jenny, I'm not handling the pain. I don't know what to do. Like, can you talk to baby? I don't know, like, anything, like, fix me, do whatever you have to do. Crazy woo-woo lady. Then my midwife calls and I'm crying on the phone. I'm like, Pip, I can't handle it. Like, I can't handle it. And she's like, look, I'm going to come. I'm just going to come there. I'm going to see how far I'm not going to leave your side. I'm going to see how far you're progressed and I'm going to be there for you. I've just started work. I'll be there in about 45 minutes. Then Emmanuel walks back in and he's like, oh, shit, I'm crying on the couch. Like, oh, I can't do this. I'm like, take my phone. I've messaged Jenny. He starts messaging Jenny back and she starts doing some clearings. He's like, do you want to have a shower? And I'm like, yes, thinking it'll help me. So he tapes up a chair and he puts the taped up chair in the shower to protect it from the water. And I can't even sit down because I'm having, baby's posterior. So I'm having back labor pains. So I'm like, I can't even freaking sit on this chair. The shower's not working. So then I just start pacing the halls and he's texting Jenny and Jenny's like, tell her to breathe into her belly. Tell her to stretch her arms above her head. And I'm like, whatever Jenny says, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Last time Jenny says, whistle Dixie, I'm whistling Dixie. So I'm in the kitchen. I'm pacing up and down a little bit. I'm holding on to door frames every time I'm having a contraction. I'm very verbal at this point. No clothes because I took them off for the shower. I'm leaning over the kitchen counter, breathing into my belly, and Jenny messages Emmanuel and says they're in sync. So apparently what she later told me was that baby was fighting the pull of the uterus. There was like a battle between masculine and feminine. Because I didn't know the sex again. I didn't know I had a boy. I thought it was a boy. But masculine, like this battle and he had all these, baby was confused about this again and this and that. And baby had to have some clearings done to understand, like, okay, this is what's happening. And the pain was unlike anything. In hypnobirthing, they're like, it's not pain, it's surges. And it's pain. No.
Yeah.
That's unhelpful to women, because it is very painful.
Yeah.
So when baby and I were in sync, I won't say that the pain was less, but the pain felt meaningful. Like the pain, it went from feeling like I was resisting it and trying to run out of my body away from it to like, okay, we're in this now. We're in it together. Let's just do this. So I started leaning into the pain a lot more. At this point, my midwife walks in and she's like, she takes one look at me. I'm butt naked. I'm leaning over the kitchen counter and she's like, this is not a woman who's like at the start of labor. It's only about 10 o'clock in the morning. Like I have not been in labor for that long at all. My last labor, 42 hours with Markia. By this point, I've been in labor for like 6 hours. And, some of that was sleep and yeah. So she walks in, I'm leaning over the kitchen counter. She watched 3 contractions. And on the third one, she was like, are you pushing? I'm like, I think so. She says, okay, let's go into the lounge room, which is, it's all open plan. Throw some towels down on the rug. And the whole story of why I've even got a rug is like this entire other tangent. I didn't even have a rug until like a week before. And she's like, you can go to the hospital. And I have to tell you that it's my duty to tell you that we should go to the hospital. But if you want to have your baby here, I will support that. And I was like, here, not even a thought. Here, instantly. She takes me over to the lounge room. She got me into a position that was a bit painful because she did do a check. I said it was okay. And she's like, yeah, you're fully dilated. Like, do whatever you need to do. But I just wanted to be on my all fours. So sort of leaning over the couch and knees on the rug. And it was quite a long push in. It was, I think, 1 hour and 45 in the end. And I screamed with every contraction. Like a lot of women say they either prefer pre-push-in stage or push-in stage, because at least with push-in, a lot of women say with push-in it feels like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. We're pushing. There's somewhere to channel the pain and the energy, but I hated it all terribleness. But I did it. I pushed, rested, push, rested. I could not be touched between contractions. Pip could do like a cold washcloth or give me a sip of coconut water. If Emmanuel so much as touched me, I was like, get off me. And he was posterior for all of my labour, but he turned in the birth canal. and he came out talking. So when I birthed his head, he was literally like trying to talk, trying to say stuff. And Pip was like, because my birth photographer actually wasn't there, but her backup birth photographer was there. So I had another story. I had somebody there filming me, and she was doing stills and video, and Emmanuel had set up a phone because we weren't even sure if the photographer would get there on time. So I've got like heaps of footage, so I can sort of really break it down. But he came out talking, and Pip was like, "Oh, you're already." She was sort of talking to him, and then I birthed him. Caught by my husband. We had 2 paramedics in the apartment by then because Pip has to, she's with the public system, so she has to make sure there's backup. But they weren't doing anything. They were just standing back. Baby was handed under to me, and I was like, "You're a boy." I knew you were a boy. And then I claimed him. And then I had this rush of hormones, like endorphins, just like, I can't even describe it except to say that it is the most powerful I've ever felt in my entire life. And that feeling lasted for a good 2 days. Like I didn't even barely sleep that night because I was just on a high. And it was incredible. And it's like that feeling that I got, no matter what happens to me in my life, I can't think of a single circumstance that would rock me because it's like I gave birth. I did that. Like there's so many stories and analogies and words and quotes, and it's so hard to describe it. But I faced like my demons that day. Like I stared down every fear I've ever had, and I beat them all.
Wow.
And I birthed my baby, and it's just, women need to know that that's possible.
Yeah.
Women need to know that they can do that. Women need to carry that feeling into their lives as women, to know what they are capable of and how much power is inside of them, because we don't feel like that. And even with all of my success and my entrepreneurial journey and everything that I've done, and there was some pretty impressive shit there, I never felt as powerful through any of that as I felt when I birthed my son on my rug on my lounge room floor that day.
I'm so happy that you were able to have that experience, especially after the experience you had the first time. And I love what you said. Like women and birthing people just need to know the power that they possess. I also want to say, no matter how you birth your baby, that is powerful. Like, yes. However your baby comes into the world. Again, part of it is because I've read what you wrote. I've read your blog and I've seen some of the pictures, so I'm imagining that moment, but like, holy shit, like that's what we all want. That moment right there where you just bring your child to your chest and the whole world is yours. Oh my gosh.
It's tough because you don't want to say things that will diminish women that make a different choice.
Yeah.
And sometimes the choice is taken out of their hands by over-eager midwives or obstetricians. But sometimes women just straight up are like, I know that I'm not strong enough to do that and I want a cesarean. And it's like, you go, girl. Like, you do what you need to do to honor yourself, because the world needs more women who know what they need and honor that in themselves. And I can say that and hold that to be completely true and say we need better education on all of it.
Yes.
What are the risks? Like, what could happen? You talked about the ripple effect. Like, what if my cesarean led to this? You know, I thought after my daughter was born and she had all those problems latching, she was hungry, man. Like, and for a long time, and even up until now, she eats like there's no food coming. Like we have to slow her down. And I've been like that during my life. Like I have a passion and a hunger for food that I've felt ashamed for. And I feel like I'm seeing that in my daughter now, and I don't want her to go through life feeling ashamed. And it's like, is that generational trauma or food scarcity, or is that actually because she spent a good couple of days on Earth feeling damn hungry when she was born? Like, I don't know, and I'll never know. Like you say, we don't know. But I feel like if you have all of the options and you choose to go down the route of trying for a natural birth, and you have all of the support in the world, and that includes continuity of care and home birth, like the statistics back that up so solidly, like
Yeah.
there's nothing like it for me. There's nothing like it.
You're reminding me of, there is another social media influencer who I follow who is in, well, they recently moved, so now they're on the West Coast, but they birthed on the East Coast in New Jersey, and the lawmakers there are making it more difficult, almost impossible, to have home births.
Wow.
Yeah, so this person, their name is Bethany Myers, and they're doing a big push right now, they and their partner Nico, for making sure that Americans still have the right to birth at home and birth naturally and birth with all, exactly like what you're saying, with all of their options being given to them. And knowing
Bodily autonomy.
Yes.
Bodily autonomy.
I mean, that goes so much deeper, and we could do a whole nother podcast on that.
Yeah.
But yes, the right to bodily autonomy in this example in birth. And yeah, and so to hear you talk about, like, it wasn't initially your plan to birth at home, but
Nope.
but you,
That's what the universe wanted
that
for
is
me.
what the universe wanted for you. I love too, like, on a personal note, like, I love all that woo-woo stuff that you're like, this kind of woo-woo, and I'm like, no, I think she really was talking to him. Like, I think that's awesome. Yes. So typically I would ask 2 questions, and one of them you answered really beautifully, but if you want to elaborate, I want to give you that opportunity. And it would be, what do you want others to know or to take away from your story? You talked so much about knowing all of the facts, advocating for yourself, having a good support system. Is there anything on top of that that you would want listeners to take away from your story?
Yes. I would say that so much of that second birth success for me came down to the fact that I was able to listen to myself. And I feel like we as a society have stopped doing that. Yeah. It's a big problem. It's a big problem. And I'm actually working on at the moment. I had this idea and I'm not selling anything. This is just a personal.
It's okay.
I'm working on a journal practice to help me be more aware of myself and my needs and what my body is trying to tell me, not just my mind. And it's so interesting, like even a couple of days ago, what came up for me was that my body, like every part of my body was telling me I needed to rest. And it's part of the practice is that I ask. It's a whole thing. But anyway, what was coming through really loud and clear was rest. And I didn't rest.
You didn't listen.
I was like, okay, so my body wants to rest. However, I've got all these things that I need to do. I didn't listen. So there's 2 parts to it, right? Like, we have to listen to ourselves because all of the answers are there. Like, they really are. They really are. You and your body and your psyche knows what you need. And we need to work on building a society that gives us the space to do that, because we do not live in a society that gives us the space to do that. We are overcommitted, overstimulated, bombarded with content, bombarded with news. Like, it's the opposite. Like, we are fight or flight central. Like, our nervous systems are shot to hell. I will just add one more thing to that, because the advice that I would give is honor yourself. Listen to yourself and honor yourself. That made a huge difference for me. And, I know you talk a lot about postpartum, and just really quickly, my postpartum experience with William was so completely different because of all of the power that I felt, and I was able to honor myself, and I stayed home for 30 days. I ate nourishing food. I sat on the couch wearing warm, thick socks. I, slept when I wanted to. I had moments of beautiful presence during that time, like totally different, because I had trained myself through my birth, through my pregnancy, through every part of it, to listen to myself and honor myself, which made my postpartum journey a lot simpler, and there was a lot less guilt. Like, oh, guilt, I need to ask somebody to help me, or Emmanuel needs to do more with my toddler while I sit around. No, I didn't care. I was like, no, this is what I need. This is what women need. This is a huge adjustment, bringing a child into the world.
Yeah.
Long answer.
Well, no, and it's perfect, and it's again, like that vibe that I get from you is just the self-advocacy and listening to yourself. So it's beautiful. And again, I'll ask the question because I may be surprised, but the question that I always ask everyone at the end is, if you could go back in time before any of this, and you can choose how far back you want to go, but you cannot tell yourself what you're going to experience. You cannot tell yourself what the outcome is going to be, but you can sort of instill something within yourself or arm yourself with something to prepare. What would you arm yourself with?
It's a really good question, because I believe that we choose to come into this life and face the hardships that we face so that we can go through a journey of enlightenment over our lives. So I believe that that journey is there to help us remember our power, remember how powerful that we are. So there's nothing that I could arm myself with, because I need to go through it all.
Yeah.
Exactly as it has happened in order to be where I'm at. And I still have a lot of things that I struggle with. I'm still not sure what direction I'm going in with business. I still struggle with presence. I still struggle with honoring myself and listening to myself. I still have urgency culture so deeply wound up in my psyche. I still have to work on myself every single day. But that's the journey. That's the journey. And I won't ever stop fighting for myself and advocating for myself and working on myself. Like, that is what life is. But you have to enjoy it while you're in it. Even when it's hard, even when your mental health is a bit shaky, no matter what happens, like, find those moments of joy and presence and peace in and amongst the chaos that is living in this time. So I wouldn't change a thing. I want to continue just trusting my power and who I am.
I think what I love so much about asking that question is I always get a different answer, and it's never what I'm expecting. And you are the first person in all of my sessions that has said I would not change anything and I would not instill anything. And I love your reasoning behind it too. This has been amazing. I am so thankful that you shared your story with me and with my listeners, and that you just responded to me. I really do. I feel honored to be able to share your story, and it's been amazing chatting with you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's very cathartic to share stories with other women.
I had a really hard time ending that conversation. Thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing your story with me and my listeners. I will definitely be following your journey, and I encourage others to do the same. I'll include links to Lauren's website and social media accounts in her show notes. We'll be back with more episodes in Season 3, airing March 4th. But until then, if you'd like to follow along with us on Quiet Connection, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at Quiet Connection or at Quiet Connection Podcast. You can support our community by writing a review on your favorite podcast platform and by sharing our episodes on your social media. You could also consider becoming a Patreon member and gain access to things like bonus content, ad-free listening, and goodies in the mail once a month. If you'd like to share your personal journey, please reach out to us through our website, quietconnectionpodcast.com, or by email at quietconnectionppmh@gmail.com. Join us next time when another story is told and you realize you are not alone. I see you.